Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. You're welcome to today's class, and we are continuing with our discussion on human nutrition. And so, under human nutrition, we're looking at lesson note 26, and we're talking about food preservation and storage. We'll be talking about food preservation and storage. Like you all know, you're advised to, as much as possible, make sure you watch the notes, and not only that, watch the video, pause when you need to pause, take notes when you need to take notes, make summary, and make sure that you ask your questions on the Google Classroom. Now, apart from asking your questions, make sure you do the needful in terms of attendance, and make sure that you at all time understand why you are here and why we are taking this course. This is very important. All right, so let's continue. Lesson note 26, food preservation and storage. We'll begin by the purpose of food preservation. Why do we preserve food? Number one, to prevent spoilage, because spoiled food can lose their nutritional value and safety. And therefore, preservation methods aim to extend shelf life and maintain food quality. So when you have food that is prevented from spoiling by way of preservation, it will ensure that the quality is maintained and that the time the food stays will be longer than it would have been if it was not properly kept. Number two is preserve nutrients. So the purpose for food preservation is one, to prevent spoilage, and number two, to preserve nutrients. Under preserving nutrients, you want to ensure that the food retains its essential nutrients such as vitamins and proteins. Because if you don't do that, the food will degrade and it will not, it will no longer have the full potential, the full dose of the nutrients that it ought to have. Let's look at the second aspect, common methods of food preservation. What are the common methods of food preservation? Number one, you have the traditional methods. And number two, you have the modern preservation methods. Under the traditional methods, you have salt and sugar, the use of salt and sugar. When you use the salt or sugar for pickling, for curing meats, and then you're making jams and jellies. Salt and sugar are very good in terms of preservation of food. Now, the herb and spices, you use them to add flavor and preserve food properties. How about fermentation? It helps in the utilizing of yogurt during production, the sauerkraut and pickles. All these are very, very good in preservation of food. So it's important that you take note of this, because you could be asked in the exam, which is very, very common. So remember, traditional method first, and then you have the modern preservation techniques. Under the traditional method, salt and sugar is used, herbs and spices used, and fermentation. Now let's see the second aspect of preservation technique. That's the modern one. You have the irradiation. The irradiation, that is the use of radiation, X-rays, electrons to kill bacteria and extend food shelf life, though it may alter food texture. Yes, this is not too common. It has bit of a disadvantage because when food is exposed to radiation, it has some chemical effect in the components of the food. And so it's important that you take note of this disadvantage, because truly it can alter the food texture. You also have antioxidants. For example, the use of vitamin C, vitamin E, and synthetic compounds such like your BHA are used to prevent oxidation, which can spoil fats and it can affect flavor. So take note of that. For modern preservation techniques, you have irradiation and antioxidants. So let's see the next one, which is chemical preservation. Chemical preservation. Now, under chemical preservation, you have compounds such like sodium nitrate, sulfur dioxide, and benzoic acid. They all inhibit microbial growth and then they preserve your food. Now let us see the next part, which is storage guideline. How do you store food? Straight to the point. Number one, refrigeration. This is where you store meat, dairy, that is the milk, and perishable items at temperatures between 1 degree centigrade to 4 degrees centigrade. Now, the meat should be stored for more than it should not be stored for more than 3 days. It should not be stored for more than 3 days, except it is in the frozen state. Now, the second aspect under guideline for storage is freezing. This is where you use the deep freezers. And using the deep freezers usually is between -4 degrees centigrade to -18 degrees centigrade for long-term storage of perishable items. At -18 degrees centigrade for long-term storage of perishable items. You have the dry goods too. So, storage guidelines, you use the refrigeration, the freezing, and then the dry goods. Now, under the dry goods, you store non-perishable foods, such like canned foods, grains. You store them in a cool, dry, and well-ventilated area. Such like your dried fish, dried tomato, dried okra, and so on. It has a way of storing the viability, the component of this food for a long time, but it must be a well-ventilated area. Now let's see the food additives and then a bit of legislation about this. Now, for food additives, substances added to it, these are substances that are added, to improve food appearance. When they are added to food, it improves their appearance, flavor, their texture. And then you have common additives which include preservatives such like sodium benzoate. Take note of this example. And colorants like tetrazine and colorants like tetrazine. Now, we also have food safety regulations. Now, in terms of the legislation, governments enforce safety standards through laws like the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act, which is known as PFA in India. And we also have other acts through our NAFDAC, the regulatory body here in Nigeria. And so when people, have these things for sale and they have a way of preserving it either in their can or packages, the government has the right under the regulation to ensure that these things are well preserved, so that you don't buy a tin tomato and only for you to open it and find out that there are maggots, or you go to buy meat from the market that was stored, frozen, only to find out that it was not well preserved. So these are very important regulations that guide the use of additives. In conclusion, food handling and preservation are very crucial aspects of food safety in both public health and individual health. So proper food storage and safe cooking methods can prevent many foodborne illnesses, while effective preservation methods can extend food shelf life without compromising safety or nutrition. I believe that you've learned a lot in this class right now. We have just discussed three major things under food preservation and storage. We have seen the purpose of food preservation, the common methods of food preservation, and then we have gone further to look at the guidelines for food preservation as well as the additives and the legislation, just a few of them that guides that. I'll see you in the next class. Make sure you take notes, make sure you read, and make sure you ask your questions on the Google Classroom. Of course, when I come around next week in the next class, you're going to enjoy, the question and answer session. See you. Bye.